All right, so finally we are ready to get started with this project. We have our image that is black and white, and what I'm asking you to do is to add color onto it non-destructively, and to do this through your paintbrush and colors and through layers and opacity. So let's get familiar with all of those different things. To start with, I don't want to be painting directly on my layer, which has the image of the woman. I want to create a new layer. So I'm going to go to my layers icon. Maybe I'll shrink this up so it's easier to see. And I'm going to click on the icon of the new layer, the plus sign right next to the trash can. And that gives me layer 2. And if I want to be fancy or organized, I could rename this. So let's say I'm going to break this up. I'm going to put all of the color for the hat on one layer, and I would do like the shirt on another layer, maybe the hair on another layer, so on and so forth. So I would like you to use multiple layers, but it doesn't mean that every little detail has to be on a separate layer. You can do some grouping. So for example, I could do like the jacket and the shirt and the tie all on one layer if I wanted to. But so to rename it, I'm just going to do a slow double click where it says layer 2, and I'll call it hat. So now that's the layer that I'm working on. This is the one that is active. And I'm going to go over to my tools here, and I'm going to take my paintbrush tool. Now the paintbrush tool has a lot of different options. So most of these tools, you can tweak their default by going up here to the options bar. And one of the first things you want to do is to pick the size of your brush and what kind of brush are you going to have. So I'm going to go up to here where it just says 15 because that's whatever it was last, but you know, look for something up here that's in the similar spot. And you have folders with all different kinds of brushes in them. So a good place to start is the general brushes. And so the main difference with these brushes is the edges are either soft or hard or maybe round, or you can have some that are even like square at the edges. That's really the difference. So I could start with picking, maybe I want to pick this brush here that has kind of hard edges. You see, versus this one that has the soft edges. If I want to do some outlines, I think the hard edge would be the one. I could also just make an adjustment up here. I picked that one, but I could make it less hard, for example. I can also change the size. So it's telling me the size here. When I move my mouse out here, I get to see the size of the brush. So maybe I'll make it really tiny. That's a tiny little one. And making it larger, now you can see I have a larger brush here. So I'm going to pick something kind of in between. But before I even get started with painting, I'm actually going to zoom in on the hat a little bit. So I'm going all the way down to the bottom of my toolbar, and I'm going to click on the zoom tool and click into my document in the area of the hat or whichever area you want to work on, and it zooms in on that area. If I want to switch this tool to be a zoom out tool, I go up to my options bar, and now this can be a zoom out tool. Go again, I can make it a zoom in tool. You can also hold the Alt key down on the PC and it will switch back and forth between zoom in and zoom out. I can use the hand tool if I'm really zoomed in to move my view. So those are some little navigating tools down here. So I'm zoomed in. Now I'm going to go back to my paintbrush, which still has the settings that I used before. And I want to tell you one other keyboard shortcut. So to change the diameter, the size of my brush here, yes, I can go up here and I can use this slider. But what I prefer to do are on my keyboard, the left and right square bracket keys. Look for them on the right-hand side of your keyboard, and they're right in front of the backslash key. The left and right square bracket keys will adjust the size of, diameter of my brush. Whoa, I'm not sure what just happened here. Okay. So making it smaller is the left key, and the right square bracket key again is making it larger. So the left and right square bracket keys are my favorite shortcuts. So now I want to paint in, and I can choose to keep this So my paint will come in at 100% opacity, but that's makes it a little bit difficult to see what I want to do. So I'm going to undo that. And this time I'm going to lower the opacity down to about 50%. And I'll just go over this like super quickly because I know you guys don't want to stay here and like watch me zoom in and do all these corners. But that's what I would ask you guys to do, is to like zoom in, make sure that you're, really getting into the corners, and it's kind of think of it as like a nice little Zen relaxing practice. All right, so I'm coming along, and yep, I have some overlapping that doesn't look great, but we're not going to worry about that too much right now. So what I want to point out is now I can still adjust the opacity, or what's really the blending, a little bit more back here in my layers panel through the opacity slider. So I'm going to lower that opacity down even more. I just want to give it like a faint red tint. All right, so now I can put that opacity back up. This is non-destructive, or I can lower it down. So you may want to paint in at 100% and then lower this opacity. That's okay. I'm going to create another layer, and let's see, what should I go over here? I'll do the pipe. Make that pipe. Let's pick a different color. I'm just going to make something that's kind of bizarre. Maybe I'll make it blue. And this time I'll paint in at 100%. I do like to really zoom in though so I can see it. I'm going to paint in, my brush smaller. And again, this would take a little bit of time, so I'm not going to go and do the whole thing. I'll just do a tiny bit here, keeping my hand as steady as I can make it. So the reason I like those keyboard shortcuts is I can just change the size of my brush on the fly. So I can just make it smaller and larger. All right, you get the general idea. It's painted it. And now I'm going to go to that layer and lower that opacity down. So it's more like a blending. All right. So I'd like you to try with both methods where you are lowering the opacity in the options panel. So when you paint with it, it comes out at a lower opacity, but then also try the version where you are painting with the opacity at 100% and you do the blending through the layers panel opacity. So what that's doing is it's just lowering the opacity of this so it blends through with the layers below it. Okay, and remember you have this history panel here. If you make some steps or make some edits that you're not happy with, you can go through the history panel, and there's a separate video that goes over that in more detail. So make sure to check that one out too.